type. ECP's operational needs are closely aligned with the size and scope of the CIP, as the CIP has expanded over the years, additional resources were needed to support project delivery. Just for context, the CIP grew from 434 million in fiscal year 2015 to 925 million in fiscal year 2018. And during this time, the department also grew its staff by adding over 200 positions. Since then, the CIP budget has grown to 1.2 billion until fiscal year 2026, which totals 980 million. Although this is a decrease, it still represents a 126% increase since fiscal year 2015. And with the proposed reduction in staffing for fiscal year 2027, staffing will have increased by almost 52% compared to 126% since fiscal year 2015. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will now turn to council members for questions or comments. We will start with Council President LaCava.
Right. Thank you, Chair. I know when you said these meetings were continuous, I didn't think it was all hours of the day and night, but we'll soldier on. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the good work. You know, that last comment by the IBA, I appreciate that we're actually staffing at the levels. And we're actually the employer of choice now for engineers, and it was grateful, especially given my background, to see a lot of engineers who left the city, came back and be able to get our work done. So I have a number of questions, some of which you might be able to answer, some of which I'm happy to take offline going forward. Last night we got 2 calls about the assistant deputy director cut. I'm a little nervous that because that's a filled position, that might be a little bit of an HR sensitivity. So I just want to double check the rationale of why we decided we do not need a city land surveyor official position kind of thing. So I'm happy to take that one offline. The ad, which is the Montgomery Gibbs TIs, I assume that's work that's already underway when we took engineering capital project staff out of leased buildings and put them into a city facility. And this is just a continuation of that work and consolidation all in one building. So,
Correct.
Okay, I can see nodding heads. One of the things I'm concerned about, you know, my budget memo was pretty sparse and focused on stormwater. And I have a little bit of concern that because stormwater has traditionally been underfunded over the years, that we have not been able to keep up in identifying stormwater projects outside the emergency repairs. Gilman Drive in Villa La Jolla comes up to mind, very pricey repair there. And therefore, it's difficult for them to compete through the 800-14 process. And so looking for how we change that narrative and get more projects identified and then figure out how to fund it in competition with all the other CIP needs that we have. And, you know, this came up the other day, I think at least once, if not more, as both an equity issue, because how we built our older neighborhoods back in the day, where we decided to put houses up against creeks that had very low capacity is the problem we face today. Our standards changed. District 1 doesn't have quite that problem because people got smarter, engineers got smarter and built to a much higher standard. So I'm particularly sensitive to that. And there typically aren't a lot of voices prior to January 2024 arguing for stormwater because we have so many infrastructure needs. So do you want to offer any response? It's kind of an open-ended question, a little bit tough probably to answer, but how do we change the narrative on the stormwater side, which is not only stormwater flood control, but it's also the water quality and the other things that state mandates too, so.
Go ahead, Chris. and
Okay,
then-
if I may, thank you. Chris McFadden, Chief Infrastructure Officer. Excellent question, and because what you're seeing is unfortunately, we have about 50 million program for CIP for stormwater next year, and those are typically emergencies. And what you're seeing is something as emergency, it just automatically rises to the top and almost bypasses, quite frankly, 800-14. One thing that we've done, that Todd Snyder's group has done, is with the WIFIA program, that $733 million low interest loan from EPA, programmed the majority of that funding, a large portion of that funding into those communities of concern. That's just a start. It's not enough. Ultimately, what it comes down to stormwater is we know we have limited general fund ability to actually borrow money. It will be ultimately a dedicated funding source for stormwater. But at least I would mention the WIFIA was the start, but it's definitely cannot be the end of it.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we can start off a conversation given all the other challenges we have this year, but we had those challenges last year and we had those challenges the year before, so we never kind of catch up. So how we change that narrative, despite the good work that you're all doing.
Correct.
But Rania, you wanted to?
Yeah, may I add? And for Eversource, I mean, you're going to see in the next 30 minutes or hour talking about the CFP budget. And most of the financing allocations is going towards stormwater infrastructure, right? I know a portion of it is to pay for the city obligations on the WIFIA portions, and then the other for emergency. But again, when you have a very limited source of revenues, it's like there is not much of options. As far as the 800-14, there is, as you recall, there is 7 different factors, and one of that is environmental sustainability and water quality and whatnot. So a lot of those stormwater projects, they score high, given, especially if they are in a community of concerns or underserved community, they score really high. It just boils down to some of this dedicated, reliable source of funding.
Okay, fair enough. And then I'll make a couple of spicy comments, which I know you guys love when you're sitting there. One of the things that came up, and my colleague might refer to this as well, is a little concern about how we've structured ECP versus the other departments, and the question of, there's been a big ask about putting a civil engineer in Parks and Rec, so to move park projects, improvements faster than that. Do you have any comment about that? I mean, they perceive that to be the sore point in not getting park projects through the system faster.
Yeah, no, I think we're currently going through a memorandum of understanding between the 2 departments, Engineering Capital Project and Park and Recreation. Really is about how we are utilizing our costly resources, which is a civil engineering, senior civil engineers, in the most efficient way, and how we can make those resources available to those different asset management departments based on the needs. So if it's a full-on building, a new park like Byre Parks, that years in the work, right? That goes through the full-on CIP process. But if we do just an upgrade of a comfort stations or a playground, that civil engineer resource can be made available to the operating department to do the necessary sketches or shop drawings to get this work moving. And then they're all report to the city engineer. So I hold those monthly city engineer meetings where I ensure that they're all consistent with the standards and regulation and requirements.
All right, Councilmember Elo Rivera might want to follow up, but I think I heard it loudest in his district. This one's really going to get you. I've heard complaints that ECP's overhead cost is pretty excessive and driving the cost of projects up. There's been not quite zero-based budgeting, but has there been any attempt to look at what the overhead cost is and what that adds to projects?
Yes, actually, and then I'll let Mark and Elif to add, but this is this ongoing process to ensure that the department is sized correctly. And then just the example that Jillian's mentioned, that we'll continue to size the department operation with the program, with the CIP program. And then part of that sizing is looking at our overhead cost. And then it has been decreasing over the year where we started. We ensure that we, at the end of the day, that we break even. We're special revenue funds, so we have to be cost recoverable from that perspective. And as a matter of fact, I think the team is looking into further reducing the overhead costs for FY27. So I'm not sure if Elif and Mark want to share some of those exact numbers.
Yeah, thank you, Rania. Yes, we just actually finished an analysis of our overhead rate, and because our costs are decreasing due to many reasons, our overhead rate is actually going to be going down by 10%.
Oh.
So that'll be a huge savings to the asset owning departments.
Okay.
So,
No comment on the quality work you guys do, but as we try to figure out funding for projects, it's just one more element, but that's good news. I'm glad I asked the question. And then just to go off on a bang, one of the things we also heard, and I know my colleagues have spoken to this, about the Climate Equity Fund, which is being swept again. And there was public comment about it, and I thought about it as I was driving home at 10:30 last night. I think we set ourselves up at budget, and this is kind of my reflection on the comments of the Council President Pro Tem yesterday, is this council, this mayor, prior councils, prior mayors, has a tendency to create special buckets of money to show, and I'll just need 3 minutes, but this will be my last one, to create special buckets to show that we care about an issue, maybe to get a soundbite out of it. And we create these special buckets rather than embedding our values into the existing process. We create these new things. And what appears to happen, and we saw it last year, we're seeing it again this year, those become things with targets on their back that says, oh, we're going to sweep that bucket. 800-14 has, and I keep referring to that, that's the one that creates a matrix to prioritize CIP projects. Built in a major equity component to that, which gives a dramatic bump to under-resourced communities. And it seems like that one, if we just embedded our focus on 800-14 and believed in that, instead of creating buckets that are easy targets during budget cycle, that we would avoid this problem. At the end of the day, the public only cares that we build these projects, we address the equity components of under-resourced communities. This is not as much of a question for you as a question for us elected officials and how we do things. But you know, that somebody made a joke last night that got a good laugh, but it really wasn't very funny, that if you stop calling things equity, they will stop getting cut during the budget cycle. But they're targets on their back, and I think we have to think about stop doing that. That's not your issue per se, but this was a good moment for me to raise it. And for the rest of us, perhaps, to think about it. Let's build it into our values. Let's build it into our evaluation matrices. And so we're delivering what people need and want, rather than setting things up to be cut every budget cycle. And we have to go through these painful conversations. I want to see these projects delivered. I've committed to an equity focus outside of my district, but we have to do it differently. And any suggestions you have, I'm not going to ask for an answer, but any suggestions you have about doing it that way so that we don't kind of keep doing this over and over again, as the Pro Tem was so eloquent in the statements yesterday. But that's kind of what I learned from all the public comment last night in a very late night drive home. So with that, I'll close. Thank you, Chair, for the time. Thank you all for the good work you're doing.
Thank you, Council President. We will go to Pro Tem Lee.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair. Just to start off, looking at the department, so the significant reductions in positions were largely to the 32 FTEs that I believe were all vacant, and then there's the discussion of the one filled position. Because so much of ENCP's budget is funded by CIP, it noted the revenue reduction as well of $4.3 million. Can you help me explain the offset between the two? And how long have these positions been vacant? And yeah, I'm just trying to understand if they've been vacant any longer than a short period of time, then we weren't generating revenue off of them anyways?
Sure. So a lot of the positions are revenue generating. So when we budget for the position, there's an expense and then a corresponding revenue adjustment for that position. So when we reduce the position, we're also reducing the revenue that goes with that position. But those positions have been vacant various times, some a few months, some have been 6 months, maybe a year. We we don't have a lot of turnover, but we have retirements, we have people transferring out to different departments, so it's kind of hard to tell, exactly when they became vacant at that point.
Thank you for helping to share that. It's helpful just to understand what the net was, and it made me think of where this might have applied in a prior year as well. I appreciated the IBA's analysis, especially in showing the growth of our CIP program over the last decade, and that frankly, despite the staff growth that people have seen, to recognize that that actually hasn't kept up with the amount of work that we are delivering. And I imagine it's been more complicated as well, considering how much we're working with public utilities and others on some really major projects. Another component I was curious about was, and it's only a small paragraph in the IBA's report, but the $19.6 million in revised reimbursements. Is it a multi-year set of reimbursements that are being caught up, and are they reimbursements from other departments or from enterprise departments? Sorry, other general fund departments or enterprise departments?
So typically, each year, our revenue gets adjusted to either match our expenditure budget or to match our projected revenues based on our 5-year financial outlook. And so last year, there was some miscommunication between our department and Department of Finance, and that revenue adjustment wasn't adjusted. And so there was a big gap of about 19 million. So 10 million of that was because of an adjustment. The other 10 million was because of projected revenues. So for 2027, we're asking for that $19 million adjustment so that it equals our expenditure budget, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I don't, Jillian, if you could walk us through that. I think both to understand not just what it is, but also if there is any budgetary impact. Is it just an accounting?
Correct. It
Miss?
is accounting. The money comes from the CIP, so it's a lot of different funding sources, probably largely PUD. But yeah, it's just to make sure that the expenditures equal to the revenue.
So last year, for example, if we discovered we were $10 million short in some of the reimbursement, and we had under budgeted for that, did we end up in this current fiscal year, have we made the adjustments to catch up for that, if that makes sense? And now we're budgeting for it moving forward?
No, what really happens is that come next year during the budget monitoring reports, then we would have to explain why our revenues are either higher or lower than the revenue budget. And so that's where it really comes into play. So for example, if this $19 million adjustment wasn't approved, and that means our revenue budget would be really low. But in reality, next year, we're going to generate $180 million in revenue. And then we're going to have to come to council and explain why do we generate so much revenue compared to our adopted budget.
Got it.
So it's really just a true up to ensure that the revenues reflect what we are accurately going to bring in for 2027.
When I think of true up, I just think of usually looking in arrears, right? So at the end of a year,
Sure.
seeing that we're behind, then we're making a budget adjustment to
It's
get
more
that.
of alignment.
So what you're saying is that, yeah, based on your projections for next year's revenue,
Correct.
that's okay, got it. That makes sense. And then my last question is maybe just a broader one, which is the shift of a deputy chief operating officer position or part of one specifically into ENCP. And so, and Rolando, I will acknowledge, I think this is just one move of many under the office of the mayor. And so maybe I'll just turn to the chair to ask for a quick moment. But we don't have, sorry, I don't want to interrupt the chair, but we don't have the office of the mayor presenting this week on their budget, correct? Okay.
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Rolando Charvel, CFO. This was a change that was implemented in FY26. The cost of the various chiefs, the deputy chief operating officers, were allocated based on the funds that they oversee. For example, a good example is Chris McFadden oversees half of PUD, half of his time goes to PUD, a quarter goes to ESD. So those costs were basically allocated to the appropriate funds in this case. Rania's time is being allocated to the ENCP fund. That was done to achieve budgetary savings in the general fund and properly allocate the cost of that function and the oversight to the appropriate funds.
Is the move being made to the ENCP general fund, or is it being moved to a non-general fund component?
To the ENCP Special Revenue Fund.
Oh, to the special revenue fund. Okay. Um, Maybe we'll get to the broader series of moves as a result, because I think uniquely, and I know you mentioned maybe some of this has been applicable in past years as well, but there seems to be a fairly sizable number of moves coming from that office into other departments, especially at a time when we're actually decreasing and removing positions from a variety of departments. But we'll touch base on that at a later point. Thank you, Chair.
And Councilmember Lee, just to clarify, ECP does not have any general fund allocations part of their budget.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pro Tem. Councilmember Rain, I just want to check, make sure you're okay.
I have comments on the next item.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, will do. We'll go next to Councilmember Elo Rivera.
All right, thank you, Chair. And apologies, I thought I'd hit the lights before. Thank you for the presentation. And thanks for the questions from my colleagues. To pick up where Council President had kind of touched upon the issue raised from some of the advocates in City Heights. I want to kind of drill down to what I think they're trying to understand, which is basically like, how do things take so long, and why do they cost so much, and why wouldn't it make more sense to assign engineers to Parks and Rec so that they can just focus on the playground that's trying to be designed in a way that we can explain to community members? Is there a way to respond to this request that they're making a very specific request that City can, but I think there's a broader frustration when community comes to us and asks us for not like a whole park, but like things that seem pretty straightforward, and we tell them the timeline's going to be years, and they look at us like, why? Like, help us understand that from a departmental high level understanding.
I think in the case of a park, for example, either installing a brand new playground equipment or replacing a playground equipment, the process is outlined by Council Policy 600-33. And if it is a brand new playground, it requires a general development plan to go through the community input process and end up with the Park and Rec Board. That may take some time. But in case of a replacement of a playground, we need to look into the associated AD upgrades and if any environmental impacts that are associated with that playground. But if I could specifically address the collaboration between Park and Rec, landscape designers, and the engineers in the Engineering Capital Projects Department. Throughout the years, that collaboration existed like it did within any other department. But in recent years, Park and Rec employed more landscape designers, creating this in-house resource to be able to handle the design part of it. In return, Engineering Capital Projects Department, with the current MOU, assigned a specific civil engineer focusing on facilities and park design related civil engineering components. Could it be the design of the footings, what have you? That is strengthening that collaboration more. It will have savings in the time. In addition to that, we are also looking alternative delivery methods for her playground replacements like we did in the past, which is putting out a design build contract and asking for the design and the replacement. In this particular case, actually the community group members that are bringing this up are part of the interview panel, which we are about to open bid. So we are going from two avenues, if you will, council member. Definitely documented that strengthened the collaboration between the park designers and Park and Rec, and a dedicated civil engineer that is focusing this type of projects within Engineering Capital Projects. You will see more of these collaborations coming forward, reducing the timeline of hiring a consultant, if you will, and one procurement of just putting out the construction bid. So outside of the CEQA environmental requirements, there is efficiencies within us. We just cannot control the external permitting, if I could. And we are going to utilize design build more and more for the playground replacements like we did in the past. hope that answers your question.
May I add, council member? So I met with Mid-City Kent recently, now with my new role, overseeing both park and recreation and engineering capital project as also city engineer. So just like maybe present a little bit more opportunity for better collaboration and oversight on both ends. One of the biggest concern is you don't want to put an expensive positions such as senior civil engineer in general fund departments, really where you do not know how the work fluctuates as far as the ability to do more of those park improvement
Mhm.
within the park and rec department versus having it part of the engineering capital project. That was another concern or consideration when we said we will make this resource available in the special revenue fund department. And then when the works is present itself, we can pull that resource and provide the support needed. So it would require like collaboration between staff, and then I remain to be optimistic with the new structure now, and then I provide oversight to the two departments that we will gain that efficiency.
I appreciate that. Elif, in your response, I think, it was, well, I appreciated it. I think that response would similarly, if I was explain that, if we sat down with, again, just an ordinary person in the neighborhood and walked them through that, they'd be like, I can go buy a playground at the hardware store. I can order it online, like get it installed in a couple months. Like, I think they're just so, especially given where we're at in terms of budget, there's we need to be more efficient. We need to be more efficient. And we need to be more efficient, not just because we need to like save as much money as possible, but because we need to continue to deliver for folks. And if they don't see us doing things, and I want to say this with like full acknowledgement that your work's essential, but people don't see it, right? It's like they see the result of your work, but they don't see your work. And so I want the end product to show up in people's neighborhoods as quickly as possible so that they believe that the city actually does stuff. Are there council policies that we should be thinking about that are adding unnecessary time and expense in a way that we really should be kind of reflecting upon and saying, that was a common sense thing a while back and doesn't make sense now. And, I would say just personally, like nothing's off limits in terms of being told like, yeah, we should be taking a look at X, Y, or Z in terms of council policies.
Absolutely. There's a few council policies that Park and Recreation Department will be bringing forward to council. Those are related to the GDP requirement, and then that process, in order to be able to do any improvement in a park, you have to do a full-on GDP or GDP amendment, and then that can be a year or two in the work. So this is something that the Park and Rec staff, they're working on a couple of council policy related to community engagement and then general development plans and those requirements, and we'll be bringing forward to council.
Okay, I appreciate that. And in terms of money, what is that time? Do you have a ballpark of what that ends up resulting in?
The saving, like on average, for any general development plans, could be $500,000 to $1 million, and then the time can be up to 18 months.
Yeah. Okay, we should do that. I know there's like, we need to look at the totality of what's coming, but I also think we should do that as quickly as possible. And this is, I think, just like a broader recommendation for staff. You all know, like in a way that is much more difficult for us to see from our vantage point, of the things that are just kind of baked into process because of policy decisions, many of which were made by councils of the past. That doesn't mean that they were wrong then, but again, like they just were made a while ago. They're baked in, and we just kind of like take on face value that that is the length of the process now. I would say, again, because we need to be as efficient as possible, and two, we need to be as efficient as possible because we need to save money and because we need to deliver tangible results in people's neighborhoods. I would say that nothing's off limits to me, at least for discussion. And I would really welcome you and anyone from staff to like raise your hand and say, hey, just so y'all know, this part of the process that's baked into everything that we do is adding 12 months or a year and a half and $500,000 to $1 million in cost. I want to know when that's unnecessary. And by unnecessary, I mean that like in a very literal way. Like this is like, we don't actually have to do this and we're doing it every single time. Please let us know when we're coming across those things. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Elo Rivera. I think I'm not seeing any other members on the lights. I think I do, just to kind of, I guess, clarify. I agree that things need to move faster. I think, Rania, you and I have had several conversations about that. You know, the longer we take as we are in certain phases, I guess, of the projects, at the end of the day, it ends up impacting the CIP in regards to what we can get done programmatically overall, right? And I think that's why it's so critical to understand your cost and how everything relates to the CIP. Even how we deal with other administrative things in regards to the CIP, if it's equal opportunity contracting or prevailing wage monitoring, right? All of that gets hits these specific projects in the CIP. I think just to clarify, when we talk about parks, and parks are always a sensitive subject, but not everything requires a GDP revision. I've had upgrades to tot lots in my district that did not require a GDP amendment. And so I think we just need to understand exactly when that triggers what's required, which typically it's when you are, say, changing repurposing a certain area within a park. So typically, if we have a tot lot, if we are adding square footage, making it larger, doing certain things, then yes, it triggers other conversations and needs. But like for like, typically, we should be able to move pretty quickly, go in and take care of what we need to take care of. I think ADA has come up. I think we had a young lady that came and was advocating for our ADA improvements. We have a considerable backlog from the meeting that I went to. I do have, I want to say 2 parks right now where we are going through some ADA improvements, which again, I will say seems to take quite a bit of time to get us through that process. My question is more so, we still use outside designers and so forth that we subcontract with. Can you kind of shed some light on how you guys are managing those contracts and how you prioritize to make sure that we're getting things done that we need to get done, especially as I've kind of raised a question about as needed, right? We have an as needed contract and we tend to use the same consultants on a regular basis, but how are we monitoring their progress and ensuring that we're driving as you're prioritizing amongst all the different stakeholders? How do we make that happen? How are you managing that?
I think every as needed consultant we hire, they need to stay as part of a rotation process that we usually have 2 or 3 consultants in any engineering specialty area. The way that we monitor their progress is at every stage of the project delivery, our project managers are required to provide consultant evaluations indicating and looking at the performance of the consultant for that particular phase. Could it be 30, 60, and 100? And throughout that, the comments in the areas of improvement or maybe accolades are proposed for the better performance or the next. And at the end of the construction phase, bid and award on construction is actually the biggest feedback they receive from us, because their design in a design bid build environment could be direct result of the change orders and the progress of the construction. So the final evaluation is part of that as well. And we recently updated AR, actually with the help of purchasing contracting, to have this more robust in an area that is accessible to all the project managers going to interview new consultants, so that they could have a look at that past performances and indicate that. We also have a diversified interview panel, members from the construction team, members from the asset managing departments interviewing these consultants, make a concerted effort that the new consultants are submitting proposals through the consultant industry meetings and such, so that we have a better portfolio of consultants supporting us, good or bad. And yeah.
I appreciate that. Let me ask it a little differently.
Yes,
Do
sir.
you guys have a scheduling software or something in place that how you're managing the 20 task orders that Rick Engineering might have to provide service? That's what I'm looking at. How are you guys managing and prioritizing? Can you give some insight to that process? Because as my good friend, Councilmember Ely Rivera said, he's getting calls about a park, but I'm also calling you for four parks. Pro Tem Lee's calling for his 6 parks. You know, Councilmember Moreno's calling for her parks. How are we? And of course, our good friend, Councilmember Whitburn, how are you guys? I think there needs to be some conversation, and maybe today's not the day, but I think it's something you should look at.
Sure.
So that we can understand how we are prioritizing and managing things. Because that's where my concern is at, because we should be driving the phases of the projects, right? I'm very, very fair, but I'd like to say very firm with consultants. If you reach your milestone, good. If you don't, hey, I'm going to look at other means and methods to get done what I need to get done, right? I asked the question, how often do we go after our consultants' E&O insurance?
Yeah.
I bet you that doesn't kind of exist, right? So I'm just looking for accountability, making sure that folks, as they commit to a contract, they're hitting their milestones, we're able to coordinate amongst the 9 districts to make sure that we're moving forward and not running into unnecessary delays, which for me, in construction and engineering, delays means dollars are increasing.
If I could just add, council member, I think we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. We do have in-house design teams that are actually capable of delivering park improvement projects. Just recently, for comfort station replacement projects that have been designed by our in-house design team, independent of the consultants, and they are in construction now. So that was a concerted effort started, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, but with Rania's time, and we are continuing to do that. So that's our alternative. In that realm, we can better control our resources and prioritize, as opposed to maybe partially being dependent of the consultant resources. So that service is currently available to all the park projects, and we can continue expanding on that if it is more efficient in this realm. So.
Correct. I think, for example, we had some hard courts that were designed by in-house city staff for Neil Petty's Park, right? Some hard courts that we just did. So I understand that. I think it would be good to fall back as we are looking at efficiencies, as you are still right-sizing your organization. I think it's important to have that into the discussion to see how we can even improve on certain efficiencies.
Council member, just shed a little bit light on that one. As Elif mentioned, consultants is just to supplement existing staff while we're trying to build this base and expertise within in-house engineers. They're all very talented engineers, and I think we owe it to them that build this expertise within and provide them with the training and resources. Having said that, when it comes to the as needed, yes, we have a team that monitoring and managing the as needed, but once a task is issued, is the responsible of the project manager to see through that task and ensure that they're getting the service that they intended from that task, and then monitoring the performance of the consultant through that task, and then provide the feedback, the evaluation. If need to be terminated, they do. So this is responsibility that is housed with the project manager once the task is issued.
Okay, very good, because I think not only parks, there's other things we can discuss that take.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I always talk about sidewalks. I think how long it takes for us to design sidewalks is totally ridiculous, right? We have so many standards to where it should be quite simple, in my opinion. With that, it looks like we have Pro Tem Lee on the lights. The one thing before I go to Pro Tem Lee, just want to say that I have asked the city auditor to look at Council Policy 800-14, as it has been in place now for what I think are a few years, to see and just make sure that we are meeting our intent, and to see if there's any changes that need to be made. My concern is always making sure as we are putting certain things in place that we have it weighted appropriately so that we are achieving the goal that we are trying to achieve. So I think it's time that we fall back and check that policy, as we are relying heavily on it. Also, equity is always a tough conversation. I'm sure Kim and her team will have something to say on the next item. I too feel having to put equity in front of everything is really a disservice, but it comes down to hearts and minds, and we find ourselves there as more accountability efforts and able to make sure that we are doing what we should be doing. So I think there's more that needs to be discussed there, but with that, we'll go back to Pro Tem Lee.
Thank you. Thank you for coming back to me. I did have one follow-up question, which is, given the structure of ENCP being a special revenue fund and getting a significant amount of the funding is reimbursed, I'm going to presume often from enterprise funds as well. I think the real question is that it does look like there are a number of positions that are being reduced. How much of that reduction that we're seeing is really just to align with where we project we're headed with capital improvements moving forward? Because with all of that in mind, I imagine the actual immediate general fund savings is very small, given a significant amount of that funding isn't coming from the general fund to begin with.
So council member, as IBA indicated, the increase in the staffing was correlated to the jump in the CIP. But I would like to say we will be gradually decreasing the number of staff because the cost of CIP is higher. The cost right now, it doesn't equate to the same number of reduction, the same number of projects per se, right? So the increase we have is not going to be correlated the way that we are going backwards, but we are watching the workloads and the assignments to each group we have correlating to the type of assets they are coming forward, right? You will see now there's a shift in PUD's projects, and there is based on that, we are looking at different in-house teams and moving them into construction. So the correlation is there. It may not indicate this number by number, but this is our reaction to the change in the CIP portfolio, and we are adjusting that. I don't know if Rania wants to add anything. So.
Yeah, and then just recognizing it takes time to build the expertise, build the bench. So we don't want to over shrink the resources. Well, the time comes and then we have an increase in the capital improvement programs, and then we'll have no ability to continue responding to that one. So there is a colorations, but we were trying to do it gradually and then watching and having conversations with the enterprise fund. I mean, public utilities is the main customer or client for the engineering capital project, about 60% of their workload, and then how the rate is really impacting their ability to move with some major CIP programs and whatnot. So and then the Pure Water Phase 2 as well.
So I mention all this because, especially because of what the council president noted as well. I think what's really helpful to notice here is that what's different with your ENCP budget and the reductions you're making is that this isn't just a response to the budget situation that the city is undergoing. This is actually a little bit separate from that. And I think that's actually really important to distinguish, because it's wonderful that on paper it's looking like you guys are making reductions to sort of match up with what we're seeing in other departments throughout the city. But because of that separation, I think exactly what you said, Rania, is really something for us to all recall, because in a year or two, if funding does look different and we find ourselves in a position to expand upon CIP opportunities, then the city has to scale with that. And so we should actually be careful to not overly reduce, knowing that every position that's being reduced is actually not an equal cost savings, and especially not an equal cost savings in the general fund. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure water ratepayers, sewer ratepayers, other public utility projects that we're doing all benefit from lowered costs and overhead. But again, I think in this rare case, we're looking long-term as well. So I just want to be thoughtful, as the council president noted, if there's a position or two that, as we near the end of this budget process, we think is necessary to keep, that we at least consider that as a council, because again, that cost is not the same as other reductions that we're seeking in the general fund. Thanks, Chair.
All right, thank you for that. Seeing no other members on the lights, that will bring our discussion on engineering and capital projects to a close. And now we will move on to our next presentation, the capital improvements program. As you set up, just please introduce yourself and feel free to get started.
Thank you, Chair. Elif Çetin, Engineering Capital Projects Department Director, and here with me today is Program Manager Samira Palisade. And now we will be presenting the fiscal year 2026 mid-year state of the CIP and construction report. And I will kick it off by saying, giving a quick overview of what we'll be presenting. But a quick reminder, this report is presented twice a year as an informational item, is required by Council Policy 31 for CIP transparency. This report covers the period of July 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2025. We will provide an overview of the city's entire capital improvements program, where ENCP is responsible for delivering nearly 80% of the program, and the remainder of the projects are managed by other departments. In the report, we will also review the status of some major projects, provide a high-level overview of programmatic expenditures, and review general CIP performance during the first half of the fiscal year 2026. We will provide a summary of emergencies declared in fiscal year 2026. And lastly, we will highlight just a few of the project awards received in fiscal year 2026. With that, I will now turn it over to Samira to give the presentation.
Thank you, Elif. The CIP program and what we accomplish in any given year are dependent, at least in the part, on the funding that is made available in that year. The fiscal year 2026 adopted CIP budget was $843.7 million, and various council actions throughout the first half of the fiscal year increased this amount by $120 million to a total of $964.7 million in new funding dedicated to the CIP. As you can see on the graph on this slide, the mid-year CIP output over the last 5 years has continued to increase, reflecting the growing investments in our high-cost infrastructure projects. The CIP expenditures at mid-fiscal year 2026 were $489.6 million, and as of the end of April, we are now at $850.7 million expended. The $489.6 million in expenditures are shown here, broken down by asset owner. As you can see, the largest expenditures are for public utilities assets, making up nearly 60% of program activity. The next largest groups of investments are for the transportation and parks and recreation related projects. The expenditures in fiscal year 2026 occurred across 1,339 active projects. The project count is shown here by asset owner, with public utilities and transportation departments being the largest of our clients with the highest number of active projects. Where we have the highest number of projects is also where we see the highest expenditure levels. This table compares performance measures from mid-fiscal years 2025 and 2026. Expenses are up this year, 489 million compared to 459 million last year. Construction contract awards at mid-year are valued at 72.1 million, which is lower than what was reported at mid-fiscal year 2025. However, there are several larger projects that are planned to be awarded in the second half of the fiscal year that will significantly increase this metric. We are paving more miles in fiscal year 2026 than we did in the same period in fiscal year 2025, and our SLBE ELB awards are up 7% over what was reported last year. Between July 1st, 2025 and December 31st, 2025, 0.2 lane miles of concrete panels, 30 lane miles of surface seal, and 55.2 lane miles of overlay were completed, for a total of 85.4 lane miles. As you can see on the graph, we have done more paving than slurry seal, which is an indication of both the transportation departments and E&CP departments focusing more on permanent roadway improvements. The report also highlights project status on several major projects throughout the city that have met a major milestone in the first half of the fiscal year. We will review a few examples in the coming slides. Additional information is available in the report itself. The Marina Pipeline project started construction during the first half of the fiscal year. As a reminder, this is the first project awarded with the project labor agreement requirements. The current project schedule estimates construction completion in fiscal year 2029. We also began construction on the City Heights Library Performance Annex, located in a historically underserved community in Council District 9. Construction is anticipated to be complete next fiscal year. We also began construction on the AC Overlay Group 2520, located in Council District 1. We anticipate paving completion this summer, 2026. Lastly, construction is underway for the Mira Mesa Community Park project, which also includes renovation of a rec center. Construction is anticipated to be complete this summer, 2026. E&CP hosts regularly scheduled meetings with SLBE ELB contractors, as well as our consulting and construction partners. In addition, E&CP holds special meetings, such as the SLBE ELB workshop with purchasing and contracting that was recently held on April 29th. We provide attendees with a 12-month look-ahead dashboards and interactive maps to further highlight upcoming contracting opportunities across the city's 9 council districts. This enhanced communication method has been very well received in the construction and consultant industry meetings and will help further our efforts to implement the CIP transparency policy. The CIP website continues to be an essential tool to inform the public about CIP activity. It is mobile-friendly and easy to navigate to various reports with vibrant photos and clear explanations. The website can now be accessed via the QR code shown on this slide, which is also available in the report. In early 2024, the City Council approved the implementation of a comprehensive citywide project labor agreement. Until the end of fiscal year 2026, only contracts with an engineer's estimate of $5 million or more are subject to the PLA requirements. The 6 projects that were subject to the citywide PLA requirements shown in this slide were advertised and awarded in the first half of the fiscal year. The contract value ranged between $5 million to $8.6 million. In fiscal year 2026, the city awarded 19 construction contracts with 90 bids from 48 contractors. The current year overall average number of bidders of 4.7 is higher than last year, when we only had 2.8 bids per contract. This indicates an increase in competition and interest in completing city projects. In mid-year 2026, E&CP issued a total of 36 notice to proceeds and 39 construction notices of completion, which is lower than the previous mid-year. To help manage peak workloads or to provide specialty inspection services for projects, such as Pure Water, that require unique expertise, construction management teams have executed as-needed CM consultant contracts. CM teams are structured to provide construction management services for all possible types of CIP projects and inspection services. This table describes the status of the current as-needed construction management contracts in fiscal year 2026. The city initiated 8 new emergency projects in the first half of the fiscal year, 5 of which were stormwater related. This compares to 3 new emergencies being declared in the first half of the fiscal year 2025, all of which were stormwater related. The number of emergencies, especially stormwater emergencies, have increased year over year. We will continue setting aside funding for future stormwater emergencies in upcoming budget cycles. Finally, I'd like to touch base on our climate action plan efforts. Advancing the climate action plan is a priority for the CIP across multiple departments and types of projects. The city's climate resilient SD plan calls for infrastructure investments to protect residents and city operations from the impacts of climate change, such as extreme heat, flooding, and wildfire. The council policy on CIP prioritization also gives higher weights to projects with CAP considerations and positive impacts. Shown here are the number of projects by CAP energy category. As you can see on this slide, the highest number of projects are in the climate resilient SD, flooding, and heat categories. As older projects initiated prior to CAP adoption are completed and more CAP relevant projects are initiated, we will see more CAP and EV take place. I will now pass it back to Elif for closing remarks.
Thank you, Samira. The month of May marks the beginning of a project award season for ENCP, much less stressful than the budget season. These awards represent years of dedicated work and underscore our department's ongoing commitment to excellence, as well as meaningful impact our projects have on the communities we serve. To keep today's presentation focused, I will not go through each project individually. However, I'll compile a detailed summary memo outlining all recognitions which will be provided to the council by the end of the fiscal year. Here are a few examples of these awards we received so far. We received 4 awards from ASCE for the Crystal Pier Structural Emergency, Maple Canyon Restoration, La Media Road, and El Capitan Dam Civil Way Vegetation Removal projects. We have also received 6 awards from APWA for different projects, some of which are John F. Kennedy Neighborhood Park, Jurabeck Park, and Olive Tree Park. This concludes our presentation. Now we will continue with the DOF's presentation on CIP. I believe, council member, to take questions later on.
I'm sorry, say that again.
This concludes our presentation for the.
Yeah, we'll turn to council members for questions and comments.
Okay.
We will go to Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation, and thank you to the IBA for your analysis. The capital improvement program is vitally important, especially in communities where infrastructure improvements have historically not been prioritized. I, for one, am very proud of the progress we've made in building new infrastructure throughout District 8. And I'm going to start off with San Isidro in Bayer Park Phase 1. It's in its final stage with an opening anticipated for the fall of this year. After more than 30 years of community advocacy, this long-awaited park is finally being delivered. And I had the pleasure of touring the construction site last week with the fine members of ECP, and I just was blown away by just what a beautiful amenity.
I'm sorry to pause you. Can I have them, it's my understanding they have another portion of the presentation that I think would be helpful
No problem.
as you do your comments.
Thank you.
My
I get my time back, right?
Yes,
Okay,
all of it
wonderful.
back. My apologies. Just so everyone knows, we'll do this, and then we will pause for comments, and then we will do the mid-year update as well after that. So, okay.
All right, good morning. Michael Palaio from the Department of Finance. All right. The fiscal year 2027 draft CIP budget of $821.7 million is part of the city's $25.4 billion multi-year program and allocates existing funds and anticipated revenues to both new and continuing projects. This budget provides funding for 71 different projects and annual allocations. In addition to the draft budget, We are also anticipating funding of over $381.4 million to be allocated throughout the fiscal year. The anticipated funding sources primarily include expected state and federal loans and grants and impact fees. For the capital improvements program as a whole, there were a variety of considerations in determining the allocations for the fiscal year 2027 draft CIP budget. Council Policy 800-14 continued to be used in the prioritization, as well as project readiness, legal compliance, conditions of the assets, continuation of critical programs, in addition to the various priorities. This table shows the total $25.4 billion capital program by asset managing department, including over $8.5 billion of previously City Council approved allocations, the current proposal of $821.7 million, and future funding needs of $16 billion. The future years column includes fiscal year 2027 anticipated budgets, as well as future fiscal years anticipated budgets and unidentified funding for future needs. The fiscal year 2027 draft CIP budget is shown here by asset type. The four highest asset types of buildings, some of which include public utilities, water, transportation, and wastewater, make up about 86% of the draft CIP budget. In addition, when comparing the split between deferred maintenance and replacements versus new and expanded assets, the majority of the funding is going towards deferred maintenance and replacements. Focusing in on street repair, this slide provides a breakdown of the street repair program budget and miles funded in fiscal year 2027. It's important to note that for the street resurfacing allocation, the projects may span over multiple fiscal years. The investment in the street repair program aims to continue the progress made in the recent years. This slide shows the investments towards Vision Zero and the funding sources tied to the allocations. The city continues to make investments towards Vision Zero to achieve the program goals. Stormwater emergencies continue to cost millions of dollars each fiscal year, varying based on the amount of rain each year. The fiscal year 2027 draft CIP budget includes $52.5 million investment in stormwater infrastructure, which is all in addition to the $733 million WIFIA program. Based on the increasing number of emergency projects, the city must continue to invest in stormwater infrastructure. This budget also begins the planning and design phases for stormwater in-house projects that are anticipated to be constructed in fiscal year 2028. While the CIP budget is large and made up of a variety of funding sources, nearly all funding sources have some type of restriction attached to them. These limitations can be the type of project the funding can be used for, community where the expenses are considered eligible, or other restrictions as defined by contractual agreements. This leaves a limited amount of unrestricted funding available to allocate. This slide summarizes the fiscal year 2027 draft CIP budget by funding source. I will review some of the major funding sources in the following slides. Debt financing is one of the least restricted funding sources in the capital program. Since it will cost the city to borrow and repay the debt, it should be used strategically in instances where critical projects are needed where cash funding is not enough. The allocations that are debt financed primarily address stormwater emergencies. Transnet is a 1/2 cent local sales tax used for transportation improvements in the city's right-of-way. The fiscal year 2027 draft CIP budget of $25.8 million will add funding to 4 annual allocations and 3 standalone projects, including investments in street resurfacing and transportation improvements for vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists. Transnet will also helps to fund a good portion of the Vision Zero projects included in this draft CIP budget. I'd like to note that there is an allocation of future year Transnet revenue included in the draft CIP budget, We will be looking to reduce this allocation in the May revision and replace with other restricted funding sources so that future Transnet revenue is not affected so significantly. Fiscal year 2027 draft CIP budget includes a large allocation for the utilities undergrounding program. Many projects are expected to go into construction in fiscal year 2027, and the program is expected to ramp up over the next few years. Community-based impact fees must be used in the community where the funds are collected and to expand existing or build new facilities. Citywide development impact fees must be used for specific asset types. A total of $12 million in impact fee funding is proposed to be added to many projects in fiscal year 2027 to support a variety of asset types. The largest contributors to the fiscal year 2027 draft CIP budget are the Public Utilities Enterprise Funds. $287.1 million of wastewater funding is proposed to support 17 projects and annual allocations. $290.5 million of water funding is proposed to support 23 projects and annual allocations. As the Pure Water Program Phase 1 approaches completion, the allocations specific to the Pure Water Program have decreased from the last fiscal year. There are also some allocations to projects for the Environmental Services Department for landfill improvements. New for the budget cycle, the fiscal year 2027 draft CIP budget includes the allocation of the new TOT Convention Center Fund, which is a new funding source from the Measure C Citizens Initiative. $18.3 million has been allocated for convention center modernization projects. This slide shows some of the smaller funding sources included in the fiscal year 2027 draft CIP budget. All of these sources have restrictions associated with them, such as geographic location or asset type. As you may remember, Council Policy 800-14 was updated in December 2022 to prioritize equity in the scoring way of total project scoring. The updated scores elevate the scoring for projects that serve historically underserved communities. This slide highlights some examples of the changes in scores, as well as some scoring examples in the fiscal year 2027 draft CIP budget. This slide shows some examples of equity across the various asset types. Some of these examples highlight equity investments over multiple years, not limited to just fiscal year 2027. While equity can be prioritized, it is important to note that limitations do exist within the realm of the capital improvements program, such as restrictions to geographical location on certain funding sources, the unpredictability of where emergency projects will occur, and the various phases of projects as they complete the project lifecycle. Fiscal year 2027 draft CIP budget continues to focus on the progress made over the last few fiscal years. The largest investments primarily focus on water, wastewater, stormwater, and transportation assets. Volume 3 of the draft budget document provides additional details of the program, including details for each of the city's capital projects and annual allocations. The next milestones for the CIP budget are released on May 13th, with the May revision going to the Budget Review Committee on May 18th, and the year-end CIP Budget Monitoring Report going to the ATI Committee on May 21st. You can also expect additional allocations from the Citywide Parks Diff, Regional Parks Improvement Fund, and Mission Bay Park Improvement Fund to be included in the May revision. And thank you for your time. We also have representatives from each of the asset managing departments here as well to assist and answer any questions.
All right, thank you. We'll go to the IBA for comment.
Thank you so much. I'm Jillian Andolina with the Office of the IBA. Our report, or our review of the capital improvements program is included on page 79 of the IBA report. The proposed fiscal year 2027 CIP budget adds $821 million in new funding, of which 69% is for water and sewer infrastructure. This represents a $22 million decrease, or 2.6%, from the fiscal year 2026 adopted budget. Since the CIP project allocations are highly dependent on funding availability and associated funding restrictions, our report highlights major changes in funding sources. I'll just note a couple of them here today. The largest driver of the overall decrease in the CIP is reduction in water funds. Public Utilities is delaying several projects for 3 years to mitigate the need for rate increases in the short term in response to council approving a 2-year water rate increase last year. This results in less funding available for water projects in fiscal year 2027. We also want to note an $11 million decrease in bond financing as compared to the fiscal year 2026 adopted CIP budget, as the city nears one of its debt ratio policy caps in fiscal year 2028. Bond financing is the largest and most flexible funding source for important infrastructure needs like parks, street resurfacing, and upgrades to libraries and fire stations that do not have a dedicated funding source. Nearing debt capacity limits constrains the city's ability to expand CIP financing and highlights the need for alternative funding sources to support capital projects. This funding pressure contributes to a nearly $20 million drop in street resurfacing funding. Combined with the operating budget resources, this puts the city on track for a pavement condition index of 63, which is considered fair and is below the PCI goal of 70 set with the initial adoption of the pavement management plan and the updated goal of 65, given limited funding. There are, however, areas in the proposed budget where we do see increased investment, and that's largely by prioritizing financing allocations. These include sidewalk repair and new sidewalks, 2 bicycle facility projects, capital improvements to various libraries and fire stations, including roof replacements that are needed, a new Oak Park Library, and that's funded with citywide library DIF, a new Fire Station 48 and Black Mountain Ranch funded with community DIF, and a new Mission Beach Lifeguard Station. Regarding alignment with City Council priorities, the table on page 86 shows that almost all priorities are funded. However, large funding gaps remain across all categories when compared to the needs outlined in the most recent CIP outlook. To conclude, we raised 3 main issues for council consideration. First, funding constraints and funding restrictions combined with regulatory requirements and emergency projects. These all limit the city's ability and discretion to fund new projects and further advance equity and other priorities. As stated earlier, bond financing is the city's most significant and flexible CIP resource. The $89 million included in the proposed CIP budget makes up 11% of total funding. And within that, 58% is eaten up by stormwater projects, given the great need. This leaves limited funding to address key projects, many of which have large unfunded needs. The city may need to increase efforts to better align expectations with available resources by reducing service level standards or look to defund projects that are in early stages with large funding gaps remaining. Second, continuing to underfund maintenance will continue to drive up costs in the CIP as deferred needs ultimately result in more expensive repairs or rehab. Council discussed the General Services Facilities budget yesterday, and that department is currently under-resourced and is facing more cuts in the proposed budget. Failure to properly fund basic maintenance of city infrastructure will only lead to increased costs in the long run, which we are seeing today. And finally, aging infrastructure, especially stormwater, heightens the city's exposure to financial and legal risk, as evidenced by recent flooding events. A dedicated and ongoing funding source for stormwater continues to be a critical need. As we noted in our review of the capital 5-year planning outlook, the $1.3 billion growth in the 5-year funding gap amounting to $7.8 billion is driven by stormwater drainage assets, which itself had a $1.3 billion increase in funding gap. And that concludes my remarks, and I will pass it over to Grace for equity implications. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Good morning, Chair Foster and the members of the Budget Review Committee. My name is Grace Bagunu with the Office of the Independent Budget Analyst, Division of Race and Equity. The budget equity implications in fiscal year 27 proposed budget for CIP is included in the IBA report starting on page 86. The equity implication for CIP is in the process of prioritizing projects, specifically in districts 4, 8, and 9, in accordance with Council Policy 800-14, which guides project prioritization with a scoring process. Because CIP project prioritization is heavily influenced by project stage and funding source restrictions, equity-related investments may naturally fluctuate from year to year. The long-term goal would be to make this process more consistent over time. However, we do want to highlight that the city has established new dedicated funding streams, such as the neighborhood enhancement, active transportation in lieu fee, and the citywide park DIF, that all require a portion be invested in improving assets in historically underserved communities. According to the 2026 Pavement Management Plan update, the city is committed to paving at least 43% of streets within communities with equity needs. Since those communities make up 43% of the city's streets, 45% of the capital street resurfacing and reconstruction projects will be located in council districts 4, 8, and 9, not including the Mill and Pave team, which operates citywide. This may not be the method of determining whether the threshold has been reached. However, it does serve as a strong indicator of work being completed in these historically underserved communities. Council Policy 800-14 did not set a numeric target or a fixed funding percentage for these projects in underserved or structurally excluded communities, which would operationalize equity and see equity process in the prioritization of these projects. Related to Council Policy 600-08, underground conversion of utility lines, the MIU requires prioritization of undergrounded utility districts in communities with higher fire risk and communities of concern, with the ramp up of the program expected in this fiscal year 27. 35% of those projects are in council districts 4, 8, and 9. Other notable investments among sublet projects with annual allocations include new walkways. There's one project funded in districts 4 and 9. Sidewalk repair, 57% of the projects and 70% of funding allocated are in projects in districts 4, 8, and 9. Traffic calming, 2 out of the 3 total projects are in districts 4 and 8. Traffic signals, 2 out of 5 projects are in districts 8 and 9. And bicycle facilities, 1 out of the 2 projects have been funded, and 67% of the funding will be in District 8. Notable standalone projects in these districts include funding for new Oak Park Library, Fire Park Development Phase 2, and University Avenue bikeway pavement repair. Given the structural budget deficit, the requirement to transfer $7 million to the Climate Equity Fund is proposed to be waived, which would have other been available for city infrastructure in underserved communities to help them respond to the impact of climate change. Only interest earnings totaling $450,000 from the fund have been allocated to the CIP specifically for stormwater green infrastructure. Council may wish to consider funding this priority against other not funded in the proposed budget. Ultimately, the city's fiscal position necessitates a focus on prioritizing the completion of existing CIP projects over starting new infrastructure projects. Various funding restrictions, coupled with failing infrastructure and emergency projects, limit the city's discretion on how to allocate these limited resources. This has equity implications in the process of prioritizing CIP projects, specifically in districts 4, 8, and 9. This makes it difficult for council to advance infrastructure equity goals further, such as making the major investment required to fund the Skyline Fire Station, estimated to be approximately 29 million. This concludes my comments for CIP, and happy to field any questions. Thank you so much.
Alrighty, thank you for that. We will now turn to council members for comments and questions. So just to clarify, we have heard the FY26 mid-year. You just heard the FY27 proposed CIP, so your comments can address
Thank you.
anything and everything.
Thank you, I shall. Thank you for the presentation, and also thank you to the IBA for your analysis. The capital improvement program is vitally important, especially in communities where infrastructure improvements have historically not been prioritized. I, for one, am very proud that I'm very proud of the progress we've made in building new infrastructure, particularly in District 8. And I'm going to start with in San Ysidro with Byer Park Phase 1. It's in its final stages with an opening anticipated for fall 2026. After more than 30 years of community advocacy, this long-awaited park is finally being delivered, and I had the pleasure of touring the construction site just last week with the fine folks of ECP. Phase 1 of Byer Park will include a skate park, basketball court, and a range of amenities, and it's just breathtakingly beautiful and just such a game changer for District 8. I will note that Prop 68 funding did help us get across the finish line on this one. Phase 2 is going to include the only dog park in the southern part of the city, sports lighting, and a picnic area. All of these are amenities that San Ysidro has historically lacked, significantly expanding recreation opportunities for residents. Moving on, Howard Lane Park, I believe, still requires full funding, as only a portion of the estimated $5 million project cost has been secured. The project would replace existing park infrastructure, enhanced accessibility, and expand recreation opportunities for the community. My understanding is construction cannot proceed until funding is fully secured, and we're gradually approaching the project's fiscal year 27 Q1 construction start date. The other project that I wanted to mention in San Ysidro is Cypress Drive, which provides pedestrian and streetscaping improvement, enhancement, safety, and accessibility, while also honoring the cultural identity of the community. The project is fully funded, and I look forward to the construction starting in fiscal year 27. My understanding is that there's only 2 projects like this in all of the state of California, where the city of San Diego has turned an alley into a more friendly walkway. The other item that I wanted to talk about, moving now on to Ocean View Hills, is Fire Station 49, which will be located at the corner of Ocean View Hills Parkway and C Fire Point. While land acquisition was completed in fiscal year 22 and $1.5 million in Otay Mesa Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District funds were allocated in fiscal year 25 to initiate the project, the total cost has increased from $36 million in fiscal year 26 adopted budget to over $39 million this year, just in one fiscal year. Given that public safety is a priority in this budget, I urge the administration to fully fund this fire station. I am also pleased to see that Grove, Hidden Trails Park, and Dennery Ranch projects are moving forward despite a lot of challenges. And based on the latest information, all should see construction happening at their respective sites starting next year. I will mention for the record that what this council approved on Grove Park, which was playground stations, amenities for the children, was very different from what the mayor put out in the adopted budget. I believe that was rectified because I think the mayor was only proposing right away for Grove. And if we could just put on the record that that was rectified and that the play station in phase 1 will be moving forward.
I will ask Acting Deputy Director Purita Amaralla to answer that question, Councilmember.
Hello, good morning. My name is Parita Amerlan. I'm an acting deputy director at ENCP. And yes, so the current scope for Grove Neighborhood Park includes play areas, picnic facilities, security lighting, stormwater and drainage infrastructure. We're also looking into a comfort station and on-site parking if the budget allows.
Wonderful, thank you very much. During my term, I've prioritized turning empty lots into fully functioning parks that residents will be able to enjoy for decades to come. And we need to make sure that these last few projects reach completion and are enjoyed by the community. I do want to point out that we absolutely need to see the La Media Road improvement projects through completion of the Siempre Viva to truck route missing segment. And just for the record, that's S22006. We invested a total of $57 million, including almost $23 million from the CTC, which is a state grant, and $9.3 million in EIFD funds in the La Media Road Improvement CIP. This project would benefit the thousands of trucks that transit through Otay Mesa every day, making our regional economy stronger with our #1 trading partner, Mexico. Moving on to Barrio Logan, there are new roundabouts in front of Perkins School and near Boston Avenue Linear Park. I think these are, if I may have my next 3 minutes. Thank you. Boston Avenue Linear Park roundabouts, including the one in front of Perkins, they're valuable improvements that enhance traffic flow and increase pedestrian safety by obviously slowing vehicles and creating safer crossings for students, families, and residents. The addition of 22 new streetlights in Barrio Logan with construction on the first 12 beginning this year is a major investment in public safety that will improve visibility and make the neighborhood safer and more welcoming. This is not in our CIP, but I will like to make a pitch for Harbor Drive 2.0. It is a major infrastructure activity and beautification efforts that strengthen the connection between Barrio Logan, the waterfront, and the surrounding neighborhoods, while also supporting long-term economic growth and mobility. Boston Avenue Linear Park represents years of community advocacy. There's over an EHC and city partnership to bring new green space, recreation opportunities, and gathering areas to Barrio Logan. In Logan Heights, I am looking forward to finally delivering the old Logan Heights Library to the community. The Logan Heights Library will serve as a memory lab within the San Diego Public Library system and will welcome youth and members of the community to capture storytelling and also to preserve history. This will be the first memory lab in the southern portion, in my understanding, in the southern portion of the city. I also want to urge momentum on the Memorial Park lights, the Memorial Park lighting project, which will deliver illumination for Memorial Park sports field and pedestrian areas. This park hosts a senior center, a dog park, a swimming pool, a skate park, a rec center. Lighting will have a very positive impact on the community, allowing residents to fully enjoy public space. What is the status of this project? And once again, to get it on record, my understanding was this was fully funded through Assembly Member David Alvarez, and the scope of work was modified to add basically more requirements into the scope of work. My understanding it was EV charging that was added. Why was that done?
Good morning. So EV charging wasn't added to the scope. There was an EV charging project that was going on at the exact same time. So there was some coordination between SDG&E, between their project and our project, which required some coordination between us.
Okay, so those were two separate projects that were merged together, therefore making the project a lot more expensive and taking more time, which is what the community is seeing. This community has been waiting for 4 years. we got the funding, we didn't get funding from this is like the ideal scenario for the community, and we still haven't broken ground on this. So when will we be breaking ground?
So we are currently in 100% design, and we plan to break ground in, summer of early 2027. So we'll go to construction in early 2027.
Fiscal year 2027.
No, calendar year 2027.
Okay, so we're in a few
So-
more months.
Correct.
Okay, wonderful. This is wonderful news. We're hearing it hot, hot on the mic, and I didn't recognize you without your hard hat, so I apologize. Thank you for that update. As I mentioned, this is something that the community has been waiting for so long, and so this is really, really good news. The Beta Street Channel and Storm Drain Improvement Project is also a significant ongoing CIP project. I am thankful for the design work that has taken place, and I look forward to seeing this project come to fruition. I think the last time I checked, and basically this was the epicenter of the flooding, the mouth of the Choyas Creek. $110 million was the last figure that I saw, which is an ungodly amount of money. We're not going to be able to do this by ourselves. We certainly will need our help from the state and also from from our federal legislators. And I would venture to say that this is probably our number one. This is not probably, this is our number one project, and it should be treated as such. So if we could zero in, especially when we're asking for state and federal funding. This is just a portion of the CIP projects that we have in District 8. My mantra has been, and I've told this to the community, if you ain't a CIP, you ain't nothing. I truly appreciate, and I'm very grateful for the dedicated city staff that we have. You guys, anytime I go out there, I feel like we're cohorts in this effort. District 8 was left behind for far too many decades, and I really appreciate the staff's dedication, and also to my colleagues really leaning in on equity and making sure that these projects come to fruition. It's just awesome to see Bayer Park Phase 1, from what it was to what it will be and what the community will benefit from. So thank you. I guess that's my way of saying thank you. And that concludes my comments, and I appreciate the extra time that my colleagues gave me. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We will now go to Pro Tem Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Just diving in right here, obviously the CIP budget for the city still remains fairly large. And I just want to take a moment to recognize the amount of work that's being accomplished across the city, is not just with Pure Water being as sizable as it is, but delivering on a lot of small projects. And I think each of us have probably had a lot of opportunities to work with the NCP in looking at CIP delivery and all the challenges we have faced in the last couple of years, from rising costs to multiple bids to whatever it takes. And so on our district's behalf, I think we want to share our thanks that projects that have been difficult to move have gotten to the finish line or very close, and that some major projects that we have are actually ahead of schedule. I think that says a lot about what's being delivered on this front. When I look at the overall budget, I think it's really important to identify that I think roughly 70% of CIP seems to be water and sewer related, and that is mostly enterprise focused, and that's wonderful because there's actually a significant amount of need there. I think what the presentations don't ever fully sort of encapsulate is how backlogged we are, even on those two fronts. And that just means that even though we're spending so much, that remaining 30% or so is all that we have when it comes to delivering on a lot of the infrastructure needs in the city that we consider sort of core basic services. That's why we have facilities that need a lot of work that are deteriorating. It's why replacements aren't happening. We're excited still to see new facilities come up, but I think one of the biggest challenges we have as a city moving forward is how do I identify the revenue needs necessary, not just to balance our budget, to deliver on new infrastructure moving to the future, but to really have a plan put in place to address this backlog. And that is something we still need to just get across to folks moving forward, especially this November, I think with the potential of very negative detrimental impacts to the city's budget. What folks are missing is that if they're upset about city services being cut, they're going to be even more upset in the next decade ahead if roads continue to fall and deteriorate and other facilities that we rely on don't catch up. Doesn't matter how many new facilities we end up building. On that front, I've always wondered if there's some low-hanging fruit that we can address that I think always gets sort of stuck between what is CIP and what ends up being really just maintenance and operations from a day-to-day. I think we heard from residents that came in yesterday. We hear from residents all the time. You know, we're building a brand new park down the street, and here at an existing park, we've got playground facilities and structures that are chained up because of broken equipment that needs to be replaced, et cetera. So I think that is something that I'd like to figure out, even in this really difficult budget year, how there are ways that we can address even these small sort of quality of life needs within different facilities. I know if I'm seeing them in my district, I'm going to assume that we're seeing them in others, and we heard those stories yesterday. But that's one area where I would imagine a small amount of investment could make a significant difference in just rehabilitating a couple of existing structures. I mean, we're not talking about replacement, but just replacing a couple of equipment pieces that have broken, you know, just small quality of life enhancements that I think that refreshment will go a long way at a time where we're going to be limited into what we can deliver in terms of new or completely refreshed facilities. So that's just the one note that I would offer as a takeaway that I'm thinking of during this budget cycle. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We will now go to Councilmember Elo Rivera.
All right, thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation here. I'm going to kind of pick up where Council President Pro Tem left off, at least kind of generally speaking. Understanding, you know, we're in the budget situation that we're in, recognizing that 800-14 lays out prioritization. One of the things that we're trying to understand is how health and safety resources in parks are prioritized. I'll just be like very specific. Dennis V. Allen Park restroom burned down. I think we're going on our second year now. And what's the plan to rebuild that restroom? We're hearing a cost of $2 million. It seems extraordinarily high, given that there was a restroom there.
So I can tell you from the ENCP, we finalized the general development plan, and I would defer to Park and Rec on the status of where the project is.
Yeah, I can take that very quick. I think this is one of there's so many different improvements that are necessary across all cities park that we're currently looking into for potential allocation, part of the May revise, part of DEF allocation or park improvement funds. Yes, there is a long competing list of those type of improvement necessary for essential services, whether it's a broken playground areas or comfort stations. But I can say it's on the list of considerations and evaluations.
Okay, so if you live in Mount Hope and Dennis V. Allen is your park, and it's a park that we've had to scratch and claw for funding to repair playground equipment that was vandalized. The bathroom in that park burns down, no fault of the community. What is the city saying is its plan to make sure that a restroom is at that park? This is a historic park in the community. It's incredibly important for a variety of reasons. I understand there's a lot of competing request. This isn't really an improvement. I mean, I guess like in a very technical way, sure. Why didn't, yeah, just what should they see as the plan to make sure that they're going to have a restroom at their park again?
We'll be able to share with you all those list of improvements that across the different parks, again, that have been competing for the source of funds that we're trying to allocate part of the May revisions, and then we'll review that list with your office. And as we are currently in the internal conversations with the mayor and the executive team. And then before finalizing that list, we're committed to have a conversation with your office.
Okay. Can you talk to us about the cost that we're hearing and why that might be so high? Again, if you're in Mount Hope and you hear $2 million and you're in that sounds like a lot for ordinary folks.
Yeah, I think this is just in the back of the napkin kind of estimate, and then just without knowing how many stalls that are needed, how big is the conference stations and whatnot. This is like the average where those type of conversation they run into, but definitely with those conversation with your office and the community, maybe we can look for immediate scales back just to have a restrooms or conference stations facility in there. So this is just the back of the napkin rough numbers, but has not been vetted based on what we are visioning to install there.
One last question on this. Can you help us understand why that's the back of the napkin math? Again, so if you live in a home that's valued at, say, $500,000, $600,000 in the Mount Hope community, and you get told the restroom is going to cost $2 million, and because it's $2 million and a competing list of things that need to be done across the city, I think it's going to be difficult for someone to wrap their head around why that would cost $2 million, even if it's just back of the napkin. Can you kind of just broadly lay that out for us?
Yeah, again, I think that was numbers used from reference of most recent conference stations that has been built, part of other project, right? And then this is like average size of conference station with minimum numbers of stalls in there. And that number was really captured from most recent bids and similar project that we have installed. And
If I may add, council member, I know that the main scope is to replace the conference station. However, that triggers all the ADA compliance that needs to be provided to the pathway to the conference station. And also the materials we pick for these conference stations are a lot different than the ones that we have at our homes. You know, the stainless steel, there is a certain AML list. So it is not only building a 3 or 4 stall conference station, but every other upgrade that we need to do to get to the conference station that is triggered by the regulations. And then stormwater might be triggered depending on the impervious services we are creating. So in the surface, it is not a per square foot comparison of a full house or a conference station, if I could. And we can break that down if you like. So.
Yeah, and then the reason I'm saying back of the napkin, because there is absolutely no CIP project has been created or engineering vettings has been done. This is just at the Park and Recreations Department level, trying to really estimate what would be the needed allocations for a project we can initiate and afford coming FY27, part of the May revise.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. We will now go to Council President LaCava.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot to chew on that I don't think we've talked about in other budget conversations, and the challenges that you all face with increasing regulations and compliance requirements that are well-intentioned, but sometimes get in the way of the process. I was kind of reflecting on a recent CIP project that shall remain nameless. But this whole conversation about GDP was probably somebody's idea of saying parks are really personal to the public and we should slow the process down so the public can weigh in on the design of the parks because they're the ones that are going to use it. That then gets in the way of us delivering at a faster speed. The only comments I want to have, because I got criticized by my constituents for how I've talked about CIP projects. So I want to mention a few. Fire Station 16 upgrade, long overdue. Fanwell Park, which actually broke ground yesterday. Fanwell Park Playground replacement, because the playground was taken out by the king tides. We hope to see the Girard Complete Street project happening pretty soon. Those are all privately funded, 100% privately funded. Fanwell Park Playground is probably only the second incursion by the San Diego Parks Foundation into District 1, so I'm very grateful for the magic that they have worked to bring private fundings and a pretty sizable donation of the playground equipment itself. We're building comfort stations up in Carmel Valley due to a surprise allocation from Sacramento. Thank you, Assemblymember Mainshine, out there. And then the big projects, storm drain replacements, emergency replacements, a few on our coastal bluff, which is not important necessarily to the public, but incredibly important in terms of making sure that we don't lose our coastal bluffs and a coast that what will have to be the poster child for emergency repairs, Gilman Drive and Villa La Jolla, all the work that is taking place. I saw you got an award because the Gilman Drive was an amazing project and should actually be put in every civil engineering book about why setbacks from major storm drains are actually important. There were 0 setbacks from a 12-foot diameter storm drain. Gave the designers and the construction crews 0 room to work with. I don't know how they pulled it off. Amazing, amazing project. So I appreciate the few projects that are in District 1 that are in the CIP. And as I mentioned at the transportation conversation yesterday, and stepping outside my district boundaries, we heard it yesterday. We're probably going to hear it today about the West Valley River crossing, which is not in the CIP program. My interest is, because I sit on SANDAG, I can't get SANDAG funding for that project because we've got 0, it's not a CIP project, there's $0 in it. So I would be interested in working to see what's the minimum seed money that we might scrape together that would satisfy a grant application to SANDAG that I think the San Diego River Conservancy would be interested in leading that conversation, not to burden you all anymore, but what would be take. It's going to be an expensive project. We're never going to have the money under this federal administration. They're never going to give us a penny for a bikeway project. So it's going to be a little bit of a tough one, but it seems to be a noteworthy regional project that we should figure out how to navigate. With that, thank you for the good work. Thank you for taking what little resources there are and trying to figure out how to allocate them. Thank you to Councilmember Foster for asking for the audit for 800-14. Having been in the very first 800-14 way back when, I'm glad to see we're continuing revising and improving it and then test that it's actually achieving what we want to achieve, again, given our limited resources. So I'll stop there. Thank you again for your good work. Thank you, Chair.
All righty, thank you so much. Not seeing any other members on the lights. I think just before I just give some comments, I just want to go back to Councilmember Elo Rivera's comments, and I'm familiar with the location in regards to the restroom. When we have something like that where we have a fire and something is damaged, how is it we don't have a CIP set up for it? Or little concerned, I guess. What is that process, or what does that look like? Is it just a matter of the asset owning department that has to reach out and contact you to get that set up? Because it seems when you have a scenario like that, that you would, it would be a natural next step to address what needs to be addressed.
Yes, I think when a situation like this happened, similar to the building was set on fire in NTC, the first step as the department, they go out and then trying to secure the site and then contact the ESD, make sure there is no hazmat or any concerns about the fires and set up the necessary fence to secure the site. And then they go back and then start looking at what available funds to completely remove the impact and then, if necessary, to rebuild that facility. In a lot of cases, with again the limited resources, things start to accumulate on the backlog, and things stays in that condition for quite some times. And then when the fund has been identified along those different priorities, we go through down the CIP. If this is the CIP work, we go down through the CIP process by doing an intake form, ensure that we have 800-14 prioritizing that project, have a budget management and then funding plan to support that, and then go through that process.
Okay, and I guess I'm just concerned because I know you guys need a place as you guys start dealing with certain things as we talk about, cost estimates on the back of a napkin. If you need a place to land your time to actually do the work that you do, so interesting. Well, thank you for that, and I just want to say thank you for the briefing that I received, and Karen, thank you for the information that you provided, the condensed slide deck during the briefing that kind of outlined our projects. Glad to hear, looks like we have 142 active projects. Glad to hear we got 49 projects that will be receiving some additional dollars in this round. Glad to hear the fire station 51, there'll be some repairs, I guess, the existing facility there, as we know that there have been issues. The one thing, if you guys can help me to understand, because I am really advocating to get a permanent station there, and if you can help me to understand, and I guess this is where I'm not sure how something like a 800-14 would come into play, because this is a public safety model. But is there, I see we do have representatives from fire here. How are we determining how we are moving and prioritizing stations? I assume some of it has to do with coverage and certain things. But if you can help me to understand, because we've had a temporary station there for quite some time, where I don't think it was intended to necessarily be there as long as it has been. So if you can kind of help me to understand, is there something we need to do to better monitor, track, and to help with those, or how do we get to where, how are we making the decisions we're making?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Ted Moran, Assistant Fire Chief. We have service gaps that were identified in the latest study, which was the City Gate in 2017, and that's what we base our new stations on. And my understanding is that is how the current stations that are identified are brought to a project. As for Station 51, I would like to say it is a permanent fire station. There are no plans for that station to go anywhere, understanding we are in a temporary facility. With that being said, working with Ranya's team, as you mentioned, we're going to be able to make some improvements to increase the longevity of that until we do have funding available to put a permanent facility in. But what helped us come to that decision was we do provide the same level of service out of Station 51 as we do any other fire station in the city. So it brings us comfort that we're able to provide that service even with that identified gap that was obviously about 10 years ago it was identified.
Okay. I guess I'd like to have some more conversations to see how we can prioritize as we talk about I guess I'll say a permanent facility, right? We have a permanent station, but we want a permanent facility. I have taken the position that I'm not advocating for any new houses, any firehouses, until I get that a permanent station there. I think it's something that's needed. I think we've kind of lived our extended or outlived our desire for a temporary facility and need to get our folks housed properly and get that taken care of. So thank you for that. We'll be working on that and contacting the chief and working with engineering and capital projects to see what we can do.
And sir, if I can also add, the fire rescue department does share that desire. We do want all of our personnel working out of state-of-the-art facilities. But again, as long as we're meeting that mark and providing that service, that's where it provides us that flexibility and gives us the comfort to have that, I guess a delay would be the term, in getting those permanent facilities in.
I can appreciate that, but then I would say, hey, let's look at putting some temporary facilities in these other locations so I can get mine taken care of, right? As we are looking at where we're putting those new facilities, right? If it's good for me, it's got to be good for my colleagues, right? So thank you for that. The other thing, just we got a lot going on that's going to kick off in FY27. I'm just excited to see that on 47th Street, we have some public safety improvements with the Hawk that will be going in. We just recently opened up some new housing for veterans. So I think this Hawk is greatly needed as we've had some pedestrian incidents there. So really looking forward to that. And also with Gompers, as we have the kids that are walking to school and so forth, the upgrades that will take place there as well. So thank you for that work and getting that done. So with that, looks like we have Council President back on the light. So I will turn to Council President.
Given some of the thoughts that have been laid out before, and I appreciate your patience, this is really not about you and the great work you do, but things that I think as we're continuing to evolve. The comment that you made, Councilmember Foster, about following up on Councilmember Elo Rivera's, you know, one of the things that we talked about is emergency repairs when we have a storm drain or a sewer of water, and we don't think twice. We just go do it. And it's critically important because those serve functions in themselves. We need them to be operating again, but also not dealing with them could cause greater damage to public improvements. It could cause damage to private improvements. We just rush out there. And so the one thought that I had, which is a little bit dangerous, which is the idea of whether a restroom burning down should also trigger an emergency response. There's a restroom there. We thought there should be a restroom there from a public health point of view, and it should maybe think about a policy that says that gets added to the list of emergency responses. That gives you a little more flexibility in terms of compliance and upgrades. Hopefully that may be the one time that ever happens and it never comes up again, hopefully. But I think those are the kinds of things that, based on what our constituents are seeing, what we're seeing as council members, the challenges that you serve, that you know, I know in your hearts, in your brains, you want to be more responsive, but you things that get in the way. So, you know, that's one crazy idea that I'll just kind of float out there. So I don't need a response, but yeah.
All I say is worth exploring with the city attorney's office on what really meets the city's muni code as far as what is really qualified for emergency. I see the relation to public health and safety, and then our focus is always on public health and safety, but it worth exploration for sure.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Just I'll close, of course, you know, we've done well with our GDPs, right? We have Marie Weidman. We just did Emerald Hills. We have one open at Berardini Fields. And so we are making progress in updating our plans. Just can't stress enough, man, we got to find the money to get the actual improvements in place, right? And that's always a challenge. Appreciate Summer, her crew, everything they're doing at Marie Weidman. But just can't stress enough, as my colleague Moreno mentioned, stormwater is a major issue. You know, really need to mitigate and make sure we do everything we can to prevent the repeat of the floods that we had. And so like to see those move as fast as they can to get those designed and moving forward, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. The other thing, if you can, Rania, just want to get on the record the demolition of the comfort station at Marie Weidman, as we do have a big event coming up there, and just want to make sure that we have the access that we need, and we can get done what we need to get done, and that is not in the way, I guess I'll say.
ECP teams walking on water as we speak to make this happen, council members. So I'll keep you posted on the progress.
All right, thank you so much. And so with that, I think that will conclude our review of the capital improvements program. Sarah, please proceed with public comment.
Thank you, Chair Foster. The public comment period for sub-item E, City Engineering Overview, which includes two departments, the Engineering and Capital Projects and the Capital Improvements Program, is now open. Each speaker will have 1 minute per department for a total of 2 minutes. We will begin with Doris Nguyen. If you would please approach the lectern. You've indicated you wish to speak to the entire sub-item, so I will place 2 minutes on the clock in front of you to manage.
Great. My name is Doris Nguyen, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Sierra Club San Diego Climate Committee. I'm here to urge you to align the fiscal year 2027 budget with the city's legally adopted climate action plan. San Diego has made bold climate commitments, but this draft budget does not provide the funding or structure needed to meet them. First, the city has lost centralized climate leadership. With the Sustainability and Mobility Department still not restored, climate action plan implementation is now scattered across departments with reduced staffing and less accountability. At the same time, city planning, one of the core drivers of climate work, is facing cuts. That weakens coordination at the exact moment we need to accelerate progress. Second, the Climate Equity Fund has lost its dedicated revenue. Last year, it received $1.5 million. This year, there is no new funding, only leftover dollars. That directly undermines investments in the communities most impacted by climate change. Third, we are seeing cuts to mobility staff, including 14.5 positions in the multimodal team. Transportation is San Diego's largest source of emissions. Cutting the very staff responsible for expanding transit, biking, and walking infrastructure moves us in the wrong direction. There are some positive steps, particularly investments in urban forestry, but even those rely on one-time funds and reduce staffing, making long-term progress uncertain. Finally, key climate action plan programs like zero-emission vehicles and building decarbonization lack clear, dedicated funding. Without transparency, it's difficult for the public or council to track progress or ensure accountability. We urge you to take 6 actions. Restore ongoing funding for the Climate Equity Fund, rebuild climate implementation capacity, reverse mobility staffing cuts, make urban forestry funding permanent, establish dedicated budgets for zero-emission vehicles and decarbonization, and adopt a clear climate action plan budget transparency framework. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jillian Quinn.
Hi, good morning. I'm with the San Diego River Park Foundation. Council President LaCava, we want to thank you for your continued discussions elevating the West Valley River crossing and highlighting that this regional mobility and safety connection will require city participation to advance. And Councilmember Whitburn, for your attention to this mobility connector. I'm here to help carry that discussion forward to the capital improvement conversation. This project has been identified and adopted plans for 17 years, was prioritized by the Mobility Board this budget cycle, and has generated more than 50 public letters in the last 3 days, because it closes a major safety gap, connects multiple districts, links transit, and expands coastal access. The practical next step, as we see it, is to open the project in the fiscal year 27 capital improvements program, with the estimated $750,000 needed for a 30% engineering design. Mission Valley DIF appears to provide a logical, restricted source for this initial local investment, and would position the city alongside an already mobilized coalition of community partners ready to support pursuit for much larger outside dollars while advancing a long-needed safety improvement. We appreciate the city engineers' coordination, along with the council and mayor's consideration in helping moving this long-planned safety connection toward implementation.
Thank you. That concludes testimony here in chambers. So I will begin the 5-minute timer for all those in the virtual queue to indicate if they wish to provide comment on sub-item E, City Engineering Overview, which includes Engineering Capital Projects and Capital Improvements Program. We will begin testimony with Sally Small. Please unmute and begin.
Thank you. Good morning. What's left of it? Thank you. What? Sorry, my notes just flew thanks to the cat. Wanted to say thank you very much for all the efforts regarding asking for the Climate Equity Fund, deputizing a civil engineer to work in parks directly so that we can speed up the process for GDP amendments and for smaller projects within parks. As it stands now, like Emerald Hills, it's a very long process, and we've been out of compliance for ADA for 23 years. We're just getting there now for our design, and we have funding. Stormwater, thank you very much to La Cava for your efforts. We do need to fix 800-14 so that stormwater can get moved up faster. Overhead excessive, yes. Oh, I'm sorry, I get more time. That's right.
It's 1 minute
Thank
per
you.
department. Please continue.
Yeah, thank you, sorry. Boy, that cat has got me up a creek. Okay, yes, speaking of creeks, yes, Troyes Creek and all the areas that were damaged in January 2024, they're still dealing with the aftermath. We need to have dedicated funding to deal with the stormwater and the pipes, et cetera. WIFIA alone only goes so far. We do need to figure out about the revenue generating positions, whether we're ahead or behind on that one with the cuts that you have, but the projects are increasing. CIP prioritization, again, the audit of 814, thank you very much for asking for that. Please consider the equity D4, D8, D9. Thanks.
Thank you for your concluding remark. Our next speaker is phone number ending in 8700. You can unmute by pressing *6. Phone number ending in 8700. I've given you permission to speak. You can unmute by pressing *6. We will come back to you. Our next speaker is Blair Beekman. Please unmute and indicate which item or items you'd like to speak to. Or excuse me,
Hi.
department.
Hi, Blair Beekman. I wanted to speak to both
right.
items,
2 minutes.
engineering, capital, and CIP. Thank you. Happy May 5th to everyone. I wanted to ask the question that was spoken for the first item on engineering and capital projects, that they don't get their funding from general fund sources. And these are like really, expensive projects. So you have a way of creating money patterns for these projects that are of interest, I think, and how we have different set-asides for departments and projects I'm interested in that don't have to rely on the general fund and yet that can support city services. So I just wanted to mention that. And how to be thinking in those terms, and that we can have continual sources of revenue and funding. Good luck how to be doing that. And for the second item, capital improvement projects, improvements program itself, I wanted to mention, it was spoken by Council President Moreno, all the good that's coming out of the park development in her district and San Ysidro area, and I guess Barrio Logan also. And she used the term in how these parks were developing well, the accomplishments and of sports utility lighting as a part of the development of good parks for our future of San Diego. And ever since Memorial Park issues a few years ago, coming out of the era of the flood issues, I'm really concerned that we use the term sports utility lighting, because it really sounds like almost a euphemism to describe that this is biometric technology that's being placed in our parks. And we don't know how to say biometric technology placed in our parks more honestly and seriously. And that has to be part of a slow down discussion we have community that I hope we can have with community we can have. Thank you.
Thank you. The 5-minute timer has concluded. We have 5 hands remaining in the virtual queue. We will take no other callers beyond these remaining 5 hands up. Catherine Rhodes, please unmute and indicate which item, or excuse me, which department or departments you wish to speak to.
Hello, both of them, please.
2 minutes, please begin.
Wonderful. First of all, I believe it's a state requirement for you to have official land surveyors. You know, that's kind of like they enforce compliance. I don't see how you could get away with not having one. I think that would be illegal, personally. And then so for our top reform ballot measure 2, that will be heard in 2 weeks at the Rules Committee on May 20th, 2026. It includes 1% of TOT, or 30 million, dedicated for streets and infrastructures, including new visitors serving lifeguard stations at Mission Beach and Ocean Beach. And so for the May revise, please have the IBA mayor and city attorney analyze how much money in the TOT reform ballot measure will be created for both the general fund and for special taxes and infrastructure. Is it 200 million or is it less? Please direct the IBA to work directly with us so we could come up with a number and they know what our numbers are based on. For the period from July to November, please have Mayor Todd Gloria and the City Council agree to self-fund a 6-month grace period for budget cuts by approving a 10-year loan from the hoarded $454 million in the SDG&E underground surcharge fund balance at a 0% interest rate. Also, in general, you could also take out loans against the almost $500 million in underground surcharge cash fund balance that could be used to pay for any CIP projects right now, including the Skyline Fire Station, the rest of the phases for Bayard Park, Howard Lane Park. You could actually use this money. It's sitting there unused, and for some reason, you guys just allow it to gain interest, and you're not using your money to the best of its ability. So, thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bradley. Please unmute and begin.
Thanks a lot, Bradley here. I think you should standardize a lot of the things with engineering capital projects. Just have 5 different kinds of bathrooms. Boom, that's it. No more custom bathrooms. Like right now, you're building these playgrounds and bathrooms in Mission Bay Park. I ride my bike around there. Those are like the Bellagio, man. These are top of the line playground with all sorts of stuff. It's like artwork. And the kids that are playing on there, you know, I grew up with monkey bars, man. There was sand and monkey bars and a pull-up thing. I don't think the kids know it, but the adults know it. But we don't have the money for those Bellagio playgrounds. There's 5 different kinds of playgrounds. Which one do you want? Just have the guys pick out their thing. They've already had the engineering done on the buildings already. The plans are already drawn up for one project. Just put it 10 different places, and that's it. They got nice bathrooms and showers. The things you guys are doing down in Mission Bay Park are great, man. But they got the money from the funds now you're spending, and everything. The sidewalks are getting replaced. It's getting to be top of the line. But anything south of 8. They just need a bathroom, man. And they don't have anyone that can put their name on it, like in La Jolla. They can have Memorial Jacobs bathroom because they'll donate the money. There's just not a lot of donations going on for playgrounds in south of 8 or south of 54. And I say do everything south of 54 before you do anything north of 8. You know, it's over. No more bike lanes. Just no more, you know, we need to redefine what climate is based on decades, or the weather is based on decades. Climate's based on centuries.
Thank you. This does conclude your time. Our next speaker is Madison. Please unmute and indicate which department or departments you wish to speak to.
Okay, the engineering and capital projects.
Okay, 1 minute, please begin.
Thank you. So as a mother of 3 young children, I wanted to connect some of the big picture work that you're doing to the everyday realities that families like mine are experiencing. When we talk about meeting residents' needs, it's often the day-to-day issues that matter most. Safe, clean parks, well-maintained streets, and rec centers that feel cared for. These issues affect whether families feel comfortable letting their kids play outside, ride bikes, or participate in community programs. In our parks especially, maintenance is critical. Families encounter trash and drug-related waste in places meant for children. And it's a safety issue because a lot of these are marketed towards children, and some of them have very colorful packaging or look like candy or chips or things like that. I've seen my kids pick up things that are clearly drugs, but they look more enticing as if they're made for children. So it would be better if we don't sell these things and have this kind of waste in our parks. And hopefully we can keep the cleanups and the visible upkeep up to date. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next speaker is Judy Strang. Please unmute and indicate which department or departments you wish to speak to.
Thank you for this opportunity to share my thoughts. I'd like to speak this morning to the engineering and capital projects as well as the budget for the next 6 months.
Okay, 2 minutes, please begin.
Excuse me, it's always difficult to call in when you're at work, so I appreciate this opportunity. As a person to whom parks has been an extraordinarily important part of our life and our family life, I appreciate this conversation. I particularly appreciated the city council members' concern that the voices of the citizens aren't necessarily being heard regarding what happened to the projects that mean the most to them. And it occurs to me, and it was sort of tangentially discussed, that we need more ways to notify the residents when projects are going on, or give them at least a timeline so that they can know that their area is being taken care of. And I did want to mention that we continue to get a tremendous amount of media regarding our lack of clean air and clean water in our most southern communities. You actually made the front page of the Wall Street Journal this morning in the small right-hand corner. Clean air, clean water, got to be a high priority, whatever capital improvement programs we undertake. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final speaker in the queue is phone number ending in 8700. You can unmute by pressing *6.
Thank you. I have no idea what's happening with the phone, Sarah. Joy Sunyata, great presentations. Sarah, I apologize, both of them.
Please begin. We'll give you 2 minutes on the clock.
Thank you so much. Great presentations. Thank you, Mayor's Rep, Randy Wild. Your presence this morning completes the team for me. Thank you. Okay, let's roll here. Love the idea of the audit on policy number 800-14. Policy application collaboration is absolutely terrific. Thank you, Councilmember Elo Rivera and all. FTEs. Thank you, Council President Pro Tem Lee. I feel like you're focusing on them in the way that I really appreciate. So here's what I want to ask of our operations people. Log when the FTE becomes vacant or is vacant. We need that data to help us with revenue and so forth. So here's the 5 categories: who, the position, the date, the why, and the revenue. And if we could use an AI app it would be a lot of logging, but I think it's critical for our budget and for our public to really understand FTEs and their impact on our budget. So switching now to just a lot of general statements. Love the Pure Water focus, of course. Thank you for the Convention Center amendment. again, the water rates impact, I didn't understand that, but I think it's important for me to understand it. Stormwater emergencies, this is a red flag of prevention. I don't know what happened to KPIs this morning.
Thank you. This does conclude your 2 minutes. Thank you for your comment. And Chair, this concludes testimony on sub-item E.
Alrighty, thank you to all the members of the public for participating. We will now move to any final council member concluding remarks on sub-item E. Want to check in with Council Member Campillo. He's online, he's good. Alrighty, we will go to Council President LaCava.
You hear something often enough, I feel like I am not interested in building this budget based on November ballot measures. Let me just make that very clear. So I'm not even sure about June ballot measures, but definitely not November ballot measures. That's not responsible governance.
Thank you. Alrighty. Thank you to my colleagues for their comments. We will now take a brief recess and return for sub-item F, Community Services Branch Overview at 2 p.m. this afternoon. Thank you so much.